the rally. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, Tanya. So thank you so much for coming on today. You guys, if you're logging in, feel free to say hi. We are not going live on Instagram like I usually do tonight. We're trying to stream live to YouTube. So we're going to see how this goes. And then, of course, as usual, you guys can listen to this on the, it's going to be soon called the Holy Life podcast. Used to be called the High Vibe Life. And we're making all these changes over this last couple months. So thank you for joining us today. I've got with me today Tanya Gaw. So she is the founder of Action for Canada, which if you listened to my last live that I did, I believe it was Tuesday or Wednesday when I got on there and I was all fired up telling you guys to take action. Action for Canada was one of the organizations that I had told you guys to go check out. So Action for Canada is an organization that is defending our constitutional rights and freedoms. And they are committed to educating, encouraging, and equipping Canadians to take action right now. So, Tanya, you really moved me when I believe it was at the rally that I attended in September. Ted announced that there was going to be BC lawsuit, and then you got up there to talk a little bit more about what was happening. And you'll probably remember this moment when everybody just started running up to the stage and they were practically throwing money at you when you said, you know, you put out a call saying we need to raise money so that we can secure a lawyer and move ahead with this. And I was crying when that happened. Like I was just watching, I was kind of off to the side and I wished I had cash with me so that I could run up there too. Yeah. It was such a moving moment and I'm sure you were moved as well. How did you feel when that happened, first of all? And then just take us back to how this all started and what got you to this place of wanting to start Action for Canada.
Well, you're right. That is a thrilling moment that I'm not going to forget anytime soon. And you know, when you really understand the couple of months leading up to September 13th, when I was up on those stairs prepared to make this announcement and say, you know, the direction that we decided to go, it was after months of thinking, oh, somebody else will take this on. And then in July, I had conversations with Rocco and said, you know, I know that you've got the action going for Vaccine Choice Canada against the Ontario government and the federal government and, you know, health officers and whatnot in Ontario. Would you be willing to take on this case in BC as well? And he was very agreeable. You know, of course, he's done that huge statement of claim. And the thing that I'm most impressed about with him is that he truly understands the global agenda. And he's known about this more than 20 years ago. You know, he was trying to let people know because of what was happening through the foreign central banks, and he saw the bigger picture. Anyway, so then after speaking with him, I spent a couple of months just trying to reach out to certain individuals to raise funds. And I happen to be a Christian, so I was really praying about this, like, shouldn't I do this? And I just kept feeling like I needed to do this, and this was the direction we needed to take our organization. And so when I got on those stairs, you know, going there, I didn't have yet a penny that anybody had donated. And I was kind of like praying on the way there, like, God, you know, you want me to do this. You know how I am with my finances. I need to have some pennies in the piggy bank before we get going, right? And so there was a few distractions. I was distracted when I got up there because of something else that was going on next to me. And so that fellow behind me, who I didn't know previously, but his name is Daniel. I've come to know Daniel. You know, he started waving that cash. And in my head, I'm going, for some reason, somebody had said once upon a time that you can't take cash at certain events. And so I was thinking, is this guy serious? And so then once I realized what he was doing, I just became overwhelmed and I started to laugh and I started to take it. And then, you know, a few more people were coming up the stairs and somebody said, oh, grab a hat and pass a hat around. And then within seconds, it was, oh my goodness, we need a box. And so somebody had found that big cardboard box and handed it. And, you know, people started coming up and giving me hugs and I got emotional. And then a little girl came up and she had several $5 bills in her hand and she had contributed. And I thought, how cool for parents to be bringing their children, you know, to these events and to have them loving on Canada and then have them participating. And yeah, so the whole thing was incredible. And I went home with a backpack full of money and counted it that evening. It was nearly $14,000. So yes, my answer, yes, we're on the right, you know, step here and we should continue to move forward with this. So yeah, and we have, and been a ride.
Yes, and I remember when that man first started doing that behind you. I don't think anybody really knew what he was doing. I thought he was trying to be disruptive. I was like, get this guy off the stage. Where's our security? Where are the cops? And then when I realized what he was doing, I started laughing, and then it just created that rush, right? It's like that domino effect of more and more people running up there and practically throwing money at you. And I was honestly crying. And I was just standing beside a good friend of mine. And we were both like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Yeah. So let's back up a little bit, because I think most of the people who listen to my show or follow me over on Instagram and know what I talk about, I've been talking about, like, I have felt convicted since this started. Like, there was never a doubt in my mind that there's something else going on here. Mm-hmm. And I've just become, we were financially very affected by this, and just every day that has passed, I've, when the federal lawsuit was announced, I mean, we're VCC members. We were like, we're in, right? It was just no question for me. You're nodding along, saying that you also have had this kind of knowing since the beginning. At what point did you kind of go, okay, no one is going to do anything about this, so maybe I should? What month was that, and what had happened to lead you to feel that way?
Well, you know what I'll do is I'll back up just a smidge to tell you how I got into, if you like, I'll tell you how going with Action for Canada and how I ended up at that point, and why immediately I knew that this was a scam and that it wasn't real. I mean, there might have been a smidge of question in my mind, thinking, okay, well, it looks pretty real what's going on in China, and you're hearing about this death count, and nobody wants to be foolish about that, right? Like, if something was legitimate, you want to make sure. My mom is going to be 80 in 2 weeks, and so of course, obviously, I wanted to protect her and her well-being because she was in that higher category. So 5 years ago, when Justin Trudeau got elected, I knew that this was going to be bad news for this country. I had two teenagers that were near graduating, and the big issue for me was actually the legalization of marijuana. What people do, is their business legalizing medical marijuana. I know that many people are helped by that. Super, that's your business. But when you're going to lower the age for children and start putting it into their hands and making it more accessible, and of course the Liberals have already been trying to impact the laws and soften everything anyways for years now, and undermine our laws regarding illegal drugs. And so our kids were already getting more and more of it, and we saw the rate of addiction going up. And I had studied what was going on in Colorado, and I was very concerned. So I've always voted, but I was never political. I've never done anything like this. And I made some petition that didn't really go anywhere. And that led to me, sending things to like a dozen people on my email list. I was not big on email or any of the social media. And then all of a sudden they were going to pass Bill C-16. And that was the bill that allows biological men into women's private spaces and into girls' change rooms and to compete in girls' sports. And like, this is a very bad idea. I mean, we've fought for years for women, to be safe and secure. And now you can't even go to a woman's shelter and know 100% that you are going to be safe and secure with other women, because there's a biological man sleeping in your room, and it's all kinds of wrong. So I started doing a letter write campaign, researching, writing to the MPs like crazy, then writing to the Senate. And
sorry, I have to interrupt you and ask, was Action for Canada something you had always had, or was this just you being an activist on your own at this time?
Yes. And so this is the beginning of where that had started. So I would send them to people, and that was 20 people on my list, 30 people on my list, and they go, Tanya, like, I really did my research and I really crafted these letters. And they'd say, man, you've done so much research and your letter's so good, there's no way I could write a letter like that. So I said, well, just sign mine and send it. Just let the MPs or the senators, whoever we were writing to, let them know how we feel about this. And all the backlash, all the letters from people, that's what counts. Numbers, not necessarily quality, because they already know what's going on with these bills. So then it went to motion M103, the Islamophobia motion, Bill C-71 with the gun ban, and Bill C-75. And so that just sort of grew. And as it was growing, and as I was reaching out to people, I was actually reaching out to organizations, because I thought we got to unite across the country. So I am connected with some of the biggest and greatest organizations who, you know, completely their time is spent defending the Constitution, defending the family, and, you know, protecting individual rights and freedoms. And so I sort of thought, okay, well, this is, you know, they specialize in maybe one area, whether it's, you know, family rights or the gun lobbies or whatever, but I would like to be an umbrella organization. And so if I can help educate people, and that's where it comes, and encourage them to take action and then equip them to take action, then we could really make a difference, because the silent majority need a voice. And that's what my mission has been, because it's been minority groups, 0.01% of population, who have been able to advance these radical agendas. And it's just because they have all the time in the world and they have the money and the funding to do that. And so I thought, but if the silent majority knows how to speak up and starts to unite, then we really could have an impact. And so I would send a letter out and say call to action. And then it ended up morphing into, well, a year and a half ago, we need an organization. So we came up with the name Action for Canada, and we do the call to action campaigns through there. So we would do rallies, petitions, letter writing, whatever it was that was needed. So after years of doing this, and then COVID-19 come along and everything we're getting hammered by the government, they don't care how many letters they receive. They are just going to go ahead and do what they want to do. And COVID came along, and right away I knew. So I wrote a letter, I would say, I think it was in April 23rd. You could see it on my website. And it was government corruption and colluding with foreign syndicates. And that letter had a lot of information in there that everybody's talking about right now. I drove to 3 hospitals. I walked right into them. I videoed the emergency room, and they were completely empty. So we wrote a letter to the premiers, and we said, premiers, you know what? You need to lift the lockdowns and get Canadians back to work. The Prime Minister is behind this. They're not protecting Canadians. So we're asking you to do that. And from there on, the premiers were silent. They chose to go along with this. And so a couple of months later, all of a sudden, these bills started popping up where they were going to take sweeping powers. They were going to exonerate themselves from any harm that was happening to people, and as well give the BC or the provincial lieutenant governors control over the provinces. And that's what Bill 19 was. And when I received information about Bill 19, that's when I was like, okay, we can no longer ask, plead, beg, write. We need to take legal action. So that's the story. That's what got me to do this.
Yeah, and I think what people don't realize is there's a lot of people, including myself, who have emailed, called, written letters, and I still think we need to continue to do that, and so that they see how many of us there are. But it's like, you don't get anything. They have a mission, and that's what they're going to do. And it's almost like nothing can really stop them. So in order to turn this ship around, we have to take some bigger action, like legal action. So you obviously reached out to Rocco, and anybody who knows, Rocco Galati he's one of the top constitutional lawyers in the country. He's already filed a federal lawsuit against the federal government and a bunch of, kind of subsidiaries of that. Where are you at now with everything? I know we are supporting both, and I've got friends who are interested in supporting. Where are we at in terms of, retaining of the lawyer and getting things filed and getting things going? How far are we from doing that?
So Rocco is retained. He is our official lawyer. And what this usually depends on is funding. And so we have miraculously, we're just very close to reaching 30% of the funds that are needed. And once we reach 50%, then, the statement of claim is filed. We're going to file an injunction on the mass, and, pretty much nothing is secret here, because this is what they're doing, have already launched in Ontario. So our claims will be very similar, because this is the same issue, just different province. And so we're very excited about that. So we really need to get to 50%. And so we're preparing for that. We're not going to get to 50% and then all of a sudden find the plaintiffs and, do the other things that are required. We want to be ready to take action. And, a couple of good donors or one big donor, and that could happen tomorrow. So, we're going to continue to reach out, and we've just launched this campaign to reach out to businesses. And it's part of our fundraising. And, we hope that as businesses become aware of what's going on and that they have a lot of support behind them, that they'll actually begin to donate as well and then talk to their friends. And I'm already getting a lot of people and a lot of feedback from some of the people who have already started this campaign. And if you're not familiar with it, it's on our website as well under fundraising, and you'll see business campaign. And we created this fabulous postcard. And on the one side, it's a person, shopping at the grocery store, and it says at the top, like, to business owners, are you aware that you may be violating the constitutional rights of your employees and customers? And if you're enforcing masks, they could, if they're mandating masks in their store, then they could be liable up to $35,000 per incident. And one, customers, people need to know that, because that should empower them to know that they can go shopping. And there is no legislation in BC that you are mandated to wear a mask. The fact that, we walk into Costco or anywhere else and see all these people wearing them, my heart is sad. I'm sick about this. And, I take the time to stop and talk to people. And I'll say, oh, it must be awful to have to, feel the need to wear that mask. And they go, oh, I'm doing it for other people. And I said, oh, really? Because they themselves don't feel that they want to wear the mask. And I said, how is it that you're doing it for other people? If I might be so bold to ask, I said, are you doing it for all the millions of Canadians who have lost their job and possibly going to lose their homes? Are you doing it for our elderly who are, forced into isolation, treated worse than criminals, and dying on their own with no family by their side? How about our kids? Are you doing it for our kids that are being forced to wear these masks, and it's affecting their health and their breathing and traumatizing them mentally, because they feel if they don't wear a mask, they could possibly kill, their parents or grandparents if they brought COVID home, even though they don't get COVID, very rare, and that if they're asymptomatic, they're not carrying it? Are you talking about helping those people? Like, who do you think you're helping by wearing that mask? So these are my questions, and the more of us that get equipped to ask these kind of questions and help educate others and help, bring them to the website and let them know that the legal action is taking place, and there's a whole lot more people out here who are bravely standing against this, I think that it'll have a wave. It's having an effect.
I think so too, and I did go live earlier this week, and the video was titled, "This is for the silent majority," because I do believe that no matter what end of the spectrum you sit on, right? Like, no matter how big or little you think this lie is, even my mom, who is like, in her mid 70s, and she typically, she watches the news and she believes everything she's told. But even people like her kind of like, yeah, it doesn't really all completely make sense. Maybe they haven't dove down the rabbit hole and understand the global agenda that's been in place for many, many, many years. But most people are thinking something doesn't quite seem right. I mean, how did we go? I remember when the election was called, the NDP called the election here in BC a couple months ago. I remember speaking with our local person who was, running here from the Liberal Party. And I was speaking with her and I was just saying, pointing out all these things and saying, when did we go from wanting to flatten the curve and reduce the burden on hospitals and counting deaths to now counting cases? Right. There's so many just little things that you could ask. You don't have to be completely bought into this, right? So I do believe that there is a silent majority of people who might be kind of thinking something doesn't feel right, but they haven't yet been motivated enough to dig deeper or take any kind of action or speak up or say anything or write a letter. So what do you say to those people who are still maybe, and I don't like to use this term because it sounds kind of condescending, but waking up is really the only way I can describe it, is when somebody finally starts to go, okay, yeah, there's something doesn't seem quite right here. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for those people? Like, what do you say to people like that?
Well, to me, it's like we've got to just think critically. If you know that there's, for instance, in BC, there's 5.1 million people. And as of October 9th, there was 245 deaths.
Yeah.
That is not a pandemic. When they started this in March, in the whole country, there was 2 deaths when they decided to do this lockdown. To me, right there, people should have been saying, what are you talking about? But because the media, the propaganda arm, of the government is sending this message out that the hospitals are full and all of this is going on. And I mean, when I walked into those emergency rooms, and I just took 2 seconds, I took my camera and I scanned through, went to the next hospital, did the same. And, you provide that information to people. So back in April, when I was finding all of this out, was like had tangible, information and evidence to show this is not a pandemic we're being had. And I sent it out. I had nearly about 35,000 or more people on my email list. And sorry, it was probably more like 40,000. And people had come back to me saying, are you crazy? You want people to die. And, the fact that I would say about unlock the provinces and come out and rally. And it's like, I hope you get COVID. I mean, seriously, are you thinking about what you're saying here? And, as time is going on, you would think that the evidence around them would prove that, COVID is not a thing. Like, tell me anybody who actually knows somebody who had COVID. Like, who knows they know they had COVID and that it was so severe. And I don't know anybody, but I'll tell you, on September 13th, when I didn't know anybody who had died from COVID or who actually had it. And sadly to say, September 13th, within that first 10 days, I had 4 people contact me who had had a loved one die because of suicide due to the extreme measures, due to the isolation. These are young people. And I'm sorry, that's criminal. And people need to be held to account. So to those people who are still believing it, it's like, I hear people wearing a mask saying, yeah, I don't know anybody who has COVID. Well, can you stop for a minute and just absorb that in? Do you think that in a pandemic that's possible? Do you think that, you wearing a mask is going to stop a pandemic from ravaging this country? And then let's talk about Justin Trudeau going into the middle of that Black Lives Matter rally. I said the very moment he took a knee with them, this pandemic was over. Because anybody who truly thought their life was at risk and that, they were going to get this deadly virus, you would never put yourself in that position, right?
No. And they, it's funny, they shame all the people who show up to these rallies. And I always say, what about Black Lives Matter protests? I mean, the hypocrisy alone, it's just like, this is safe, but this is not safe. This is okay. This is not okay. Now here, I'm sure you're aware, first in BC at the beginning of this week, they said, only your safe 6 in your home. I mean, 6 are okay, but kids can still be in school. We can still be in Costco. That doesn't make any sense. And then a few days later, they have the nerve to, in the Fraser Health region, say you shouldn't even have a safe 6. You should have nobody else in your home.
Now they're talking about having a mask on in your home. Apparently, Bonnie Henry is talking about that. It's like, excuse me? Get out of my home. Get out of my life. If Costco and all these stores, this is what I'm talking about with the common sense. If all of these big stores were able to have thousands of people coming and going all day, and not one of them has ever had to shut down because the pandemic, swept through, their employees and they all got sick and, there was 14 deaths, nothing like that has happened. That's impossible if this is a pandemic. And then I got this great image the other day, and it was on top was an airplane, and it was the aisles like three deep on each side, and people were packed sitting next to each other on this airplane with masks on, shoulder to shoulder, because you know how tight that is. Mm-hmm. And then the image below was an empty church, just the pews with the same thing, and saying, you think this is about your health, right? And truly, these are godless leaders in a godless nation at this point. And what is it that Canada is founded on but Christian values and principles? And those are values and principles. Every country that was formed and founded on these kinds of principles are countries that have freedom and democracy. No other country does on any other system of belief. And if you question that, think about the 57 Muslim majority countries, Pakistan, India, North Korea, China, the Philippines there's a high Catholic population in the Philippines, but very corrupt leaders. And they don't have Christian principles. So what I'm really trying to get across here is that we need to value this, but this is why there is such an attack on Christians in the church and trying to close the churches down. because they are what freedom and democracy are founded on, and they hate that. They loathe it. If we're going to have a communist government, well, we can't have any Bibles around. Burn the Bibles, close the church doors. So right now, you just mentioned the Safe Six, which is ridiculous. And then, you've got now 50 in BC that are allowed to go to church. Well, in, I think it's Manitoba, it's like a third of their congregation is allowed in the church, and something else for Alberta and something else for, Ontario. There's no consistency in the whole province. And Bonnie Henry, I've got a recording of her saying, she's talking about people in cars and her little way she has to communicate with people. I think she's hypnotizing them. I don't know. And then she turns around and she says, yeah, there's no science to what we're doing.
Yeah, Rocco has said that before too, that, she herself has said, this is not based on any science. The 6 feet, the distancing, the masks, none of it is based on any science. She has said that from the beginning. And like you said, it's like you can literally show people this information. You can look at the statistics that have come right out of the CDC that show, the age and then their risk factors, the infection mortality rate and or infection fatality rate. It's like, 99%. And maybe for the very elderly, 70 plus, we're looking at maybe more of 95, 96%. But still, at the end of the day, we're looking at like the flu or not even. I say I'm more nervous every year that my kids might get the flu than I am about them getting COVID because, overall, this is not affecting children. So, but still, you can show these numbers to people. You can talk about the fact that we're a province. Today I was talking to actually 2 of my family, one of whom lives in California, the other lives in New York, and both, have their own set of experiences around what has happened. And when I shared that we are living in a province of 5 million people with only 40 deaths, and yet they're telling us we can't have anybody in our homes. And they're encouraging, your neighbors to tattle on you. And she was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Because she's living in New York where there's like thousands and thousands of people dying. And so the actions don't make sense. They're not consistent, and they just seem to be pulling them out of thin air.
Well, and they're skewing the numbers too, right? And we got to remember what somebody had put, I think that it's up to 269 deaths. Why are they still counting? We're into a second flu season. Let's count from
It stopped. The flu season's done.
Yeah, you know what? The last season's done. I think there was like 224 deaths. There's 225, and now we're into a new flu season, and they're still counting up to 269. And they're not talking about the fact that in the United States, including New York, they had inflated all of these numbers by counting people that, were having heart attacks and all the rest of it. We've heard about that, right? That they've really fraudulently boosted those numbers. And it ended up something like only 6% of them were actually COVID deaths. And even that I question, because as Rocco has said, they haven't even identified this virus. So how can you, say how many are deaths by COVID if you can't even identify it? So it's pretty frightening what's happening. The PCR tests, of course there's going to be more cases because they're demanding that everybody get tested. But I'm actually been in contact with the, the German lawyer that's wanting to do these class actions and all the rest of it. They've reached out and we've been having some conversations, and it's very interesting to hear that, as we know, the PCR test was never intended to test for coronavirus. It's just not it. It can go down. Somebody once described it like this. So in layman terms, this is how I like it. So if you and I have different color eyes, they would test. And of course it would come up saying, oh, you know what, your eye colors are different. Then it would go a little bit deeper and, there's still a difference in the cornea, whatever else is going on within our eyeballs. But then they go deeper and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a match. And that's what they're doing with the coronavirus PCR test. So if they go a little deeper, they're finding out that, oh, you know what, you have a source of a symptom of coronavirus in you. It could have come from a vaccine if you took the flu shot. It could have been something that you had as far as like flu as coronavirus at some point. So they're getting all these fraudulent false positives and they're using them to increase the cases, and then that's justifying them to do these lockdowns. So it's no longer about deaths, it's not about hospitalizations, it's about cases. And I've got to check this out, because my mom was telling me earlier, she's like, oh, they're saying that the hospitals and the ICUs are all full. And I was like, well, might be time for me to go take another visit, right? And do a scan of the emergency rooms. But what I was told as well, when they have the COVID beds, it was like a certain section of the bed, like maybe 20 beds, were actually set aside for COVID patients. So when they say the COVID wards are full, they're talking about those 20 beds, not the whole hospital, not the emergency rooms. So there is so much deception on so many levels that it is frightening when you get to the bottom of this, and then consider looking around, and those masks are an indication of the people that are falling hook, line, and sinker for this. And how do we get that truth out to them?
Yeah. And, you know, like I said, I just think that every level, you know, like I talked about this last week, like the fact that the deaths have been, you know, miscalculated, completely overblown, the fact that the test was never designed for this, the fact that even, you know, the testing is up, of course the cases are going to go up, and case doesn't mean you're sick, right? You could go in, I saw an advertisement the other day, Shoppers Drug Mart, I don't know if you've seen it, where it gives you, they're offering a specific kind of a test, and here are the criteria, and you wouldn't believe it. I had to read it twice, and then I had to read it to my husband twice, and he was like, what? Say that again? So it's basically like, you can't have any symptoms. You can't have been outside of the country in 14 days. You can't have had any contact with anybody who had COVID. So basically, you have no reason to believe you have COVID, but you want to get tested, we will offer that test for you. It's a Shoppers Drug Mart advertisement. It's like, I mean, it just doesn't even make any sense. That's like me going in, you know, and then I posted that on my Instagram, and somebody said, I can't even get my doctor to check my vitamin D levels when I suspect that I have low vitamin D. How hard is it here to get tested for anything? Can you imagine if I went into my doctor and said, can you test me for, you know, HIV? Like, I don't have any symptoms. I don't have any reason to believe I have it, but can you test me? I mean, it defies all logic. It makes zero sense. And yet here we are, right? So now you're going to go get tested, even if you have no reason to believe that you might have it. And then what if you're positive?
Yes.
Then you're considered a case. And these are the numbers that they're using to scare everybody. It just really makes no sense.
And I'll tell you, you know, as you're probably aware, you know, because they made surgeries and treatments as non-essential, you know, a lot of people have died, thousands, I'm understanding from certain people who are advising me who have the information, thousands of Canadians have died because surgeries weren't made essential, and as well as the treatments. And especially with cancer, it's said that cancer victims are going to go up by 40%. Because people were too afraid to even visit their doctor or go to the hospital. I've also heard that, you know, there's been a number of tragedies because pregnant women were too afraid to go to the hospital to get care as well. So there's been stillbirths, and which makes sense, right? I mean, picture yourself, a young mom, you're pregnant, you've got this little gorgeous little baby inside of you, and, you know, you hear about this deadly virus. Would you want to go to the hospital, right? And expose yourself to that? It is so corrupt. And I am overwhelmed by the people who are contacting me, you know, with their stories. And yeah, it's just crazy. And I got to touch base with the, you know, the BC Ferries and the young couple who were denied access. They had come to the rally on the 17th, and they lived on the island, so they were going to take the ferry back. And she had a small infant, and so she was going on the ferry. She didn't have her husband with her, and the people with masks on, you know, who were passengers, were yelling at her, swearing at her, being very verbally abusive. And the ship steward or whoever it was came and spoke with them. And then by then, I believe the husband had come. And so they ended up getting, banned from the ferry for 24 hours. And John Morgan's response was, well, they could take a water taxi or buy a boat. And I'm thinking, you arrogant individual, we have bought a boat. It's taxpayer funded. It's called a ferry. And you have an obligation. There's not legislating masks. You have an obligation that ferry accommodates people without masks. Period. Because this is what the shops are having to be faced with, right? Business owners. If they're mandating a mask and you go in there and they say you can't shop here because you don't have a mask on, you will be able to file a human rights complaint. And then that human rights complaint, because they're discriminating against you. And then you can go to civil court and get $35,000. And you know, some people are going to look at this a windfall and might make it their full-time job every day. I have no idea, but we need justice, you know, in this province, and we need people to actually just wake up and respect, you know, individual rights and freedoms. And if anybody goes and asks you, if you say I'm exempt, because you have the constitutional right to say, I'm not wearing a mask. I don't wear a mask. You don't have to say I'm exempt from a mask. If you want to say that and that empowers you, go ahead, say I'm exempt. But then if they ask you for proof of exemption, now they have just violated your privacy rights.
Yeah.
You don't have to provide a doctor's note for your kid to go to school and be exempt from wearing a mask. This is just, it's unjust, it's unlawful, and we need to understand what our rights are and start using them.
Yeah, and I think this is the issue, is that a lot of people really are not aware of their rights. And this is also, you know, very similar to, especially here in Canada, vaccines. People always say, oh, how do you get your kids into school without vaccines? And it's like, well, they're not mandated here. There's lots of ways, right? Like, you have still human rights, and there's laws that support you, that are in favor of you. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They don't realize that they have an option to opt out. And I always share with people Rocco's constitutional, is it the constitutional rights and freedoms.ca. And then he's also got the website as well, right? Where he's got lots of the YouTube channel where he's got lots of informative videos on your rights as a customer, and also your responsibility as a business owner, what you need to be aware of when you're telling people they need to wear a mask, or you're telling your employees they need to wear a mask. There's so many, you know, I'm a small business owner myself, and I belong to a lot of business groups, and I'm constantly educating the women in these groups who own businesses who think they can make their employees wear a mask. It's like, no, you have to actually respect their rights. And then they say stuff like, well, how come nobody tells us that? How come WorkSafe BC doesn't tell us that? And I'm like, you know, I think pretty soon it's only going to take one or two people to go onto Rocco's website, learn how to file a claim, and end up suing and filing a human rights complaint. And before you know it, I think people are going to start to wake up to this.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Like those templates, he's working on getting those templates launched, and everybody in every province will be able to, you know, equip themselves and take this action. And I think that the human rights tribunals are going to be so backlogged, they don't know what's going to happen to them, right? And when you talk about the vaccines, I haven't had a chance to call back. A lady that I know called me today, and her daughter was forced to take a vaccine for her job, like in the medical field. And she is having side effects.
Reaction. Oh no.
Yeah, sort of autoimmune type reaction. So that's one of my calls after, you know, I'm finished here. And then, you know, that's how I met Giselle and Ted and the rest of them through Vaccine Choice several months ago. Well, back in, I think it was May and June, because the New Brunswick government was trying to force a bill through that said that children must be vaccinated or they would be able to attend daycare, school, whatever. And, you know, it was just horrific. I mean, they were boots on the ground talking to the MPPs, and then Action for Canada. That's how I reached out to them, and I said, hey, how can we help with this? I'll do a letter writing campaign. So I crafted a letter. I wanted it to be just right. And then we wrote the Premier and all of the MPPs, and, you know, hundreds of letters went out. I mean, other people were also doing that, but that's what we do. And they ended up voting 22-20. And the worrisome part is that they've had another election, and now they got a majority, and they've talked about retabling this.
Yeah, I was very happy to see that was defeated. I follow that world very closely myself, and it was scary to see that it was only 22-20. I mean, that alone kind of made me nervous, and now to see that it can go back up, that makes me nervous as well.
How dare they say what can or cannot go into your child? How dare they? And, you know, we're going to fight this tooth and nail and about this government overreach. I mean, when you take a look at what they've done in BC in passing this law, when they have given this right to all of this power to the BC Lieutenant Governor, that means that the MPPs, MLAs who we've voted for are bypassed in the legislature on certain decisions. And according to the Constitution Act of 1897, that's illegal. Yeah. Right? So why aren't the RCMP stepping in and doing something about this? I'm ashamed, you know, of our RCMP. I've always had, You know, I've tried to be very supportive of them, but right now I'm just so discouraged to see that Commissioner Lucky appears to be incredibly corrupt. She's not doing her job. She's got enough information on Justin Trudeau from several different complaints that have been filed. They've got him a complaint that was filed in 2018 by Tom Quiggin, and it's got all the proof in there to show that he's funding terrorism, along with Ikrik Lid, Omar El-Gabar, Christia Freeland. They were all part of that group who knew that the funds they were sending would eventually end up in the hands of terrorists. And other police have looked at this report from friends of mine, and they said there's everything there that they need to move forward. And it's even got a file number, but there it sits. No actions are taken. If they were only upholding our laws, this man would be removed from office, very likely charged for treason. And that's not even the SNC level scandal, the WE scandal, the Island scandal. I mean, this is horrific. And all of the Liberal MPs, when we were doing the letter writing campaigns, I mean, I wrote to them all. And Geert Wilders in the Netherlands had put forth legislation that said all manifestations of Islam should be banned in the Netherlands. The Quran, the mosque, because they're going through the same things that France is going through right now. And even, you know, with ourselves, if you guys knew, you know, what was going on with the Islamists that had entered this nation, you'd be very concerned. And so this legislation, we're sending it out to everybody. We were talking about the motion M13 and what they were passing, which puts Canadians' lives and the security of Canadians at risk. That's what they've done. And they are rejecting that information. So I said that the MPs themselves are complicit to treason in supporting this. And one day they will need to answer for this.
Yeah, and it's, you know, you just mentioned all of the reasons why Justin Trudeau should not only not be our prime minister, he should be in jail, actually. I've been saying that since the beginning, and it's amazing how many people don't see that. I see so many people talking badly about President Trump, and he's been trying to be impeached, and it's like, have you guys been paying attention to what our prime minister is doing? I mean, that guy really has broken the law so many times. It's unfathomable to me. It's unbelievable. And like you said, it's like, why hasn't this guy been arrested yet? It's really crazy. Well, so yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, just take a look at what he's doing in government right now, right? He's overturning our democracy and shuffling in communism. We would have thought that we had laws to protect us from that, and we do, but those laws aren't being upheld. And that's where I would like to see an investigation and into Commissioner Lucky, and she needs to resign and step down. Jody Wilson-Raybould, you know, it's great that she, you know, refused to further go along with this, but we've got to remember what that lady did while she was in office. She voted in lock, step, and barrel with all of what the party line was doing with the Liberal Party. And then all of a sudden, you know, maybe that was that one too many, and she decided not to go along with it and expose it. I mean, it didn't do any good. So we've written a campaign to Commissioner Lucky and saying, hey, you know, if you're in the same position as Jody Wilson-Raybould, you know, either do the honorable thing and either expose it or step down. And we know somebody else would just fill the shoes, but there is an RCMP commissioner's a complaint commissioner that if everybody would file a complaint about Commissioner Lucky and require her to step down, then it wouldn't matter who Justin Trudeau put in. If they aren't going to do an investigation and do their job, then we do the same thing again and get that person removed. But this has got to stop.
Yeah, I think people are becoming or have become very complacent and do live under this guise that we live in this free country and that our freedoms could never be taken away from us. And yet they are being stripped left, right, and center, even though they're doing so many things that, like you said, they go against our charter, they're illegal, and they keep doing them. I mean, just, you know, I always explain to people, even just the Emergency Protection Act that keeps getting renewed, this order every 2 weeks, based on what? Based on nothing anymore. And my understanding is that's not legal to renew an emergency order that gives the government unwielding power, but then not give a good reason as to why you're putting that order in place and renewing it every 2 weeks.
Well, and this is why this legal action that we're taking is absolutely critical, because the onus is going to be on them to provide us the information that justified this lockdown. And they are not going to be able to come up with that. They need to revoke Bill 19. They need to open up all the stores and the doors and get Canadians back to work. They need to lay off our kids, and they need to do their job. Right? And what they're doing right now is just, a whole lot of propaganda to overtake our country. And it's unconstitutional, unlawful, and I request that everybody please share the information about the legal action that Action for Canada is taking, as well as Vaccine Choice Canada. I mean, if you live in BC, you know, it's in your best interest to support the legal action here, because Vaccine Choice Canada, at least they've got the funding and they've got their action moving. And, you know, once we get ours going as well, and if we got anything that was above and beyond what we've needed, I mean, we're going to as well be going after the federal government, and it will be everybody's money into the same pot at that point, you know, to protect all of Canadians' interests.
Somebody's asking on the thread here, and I think you can probably answer this best. I do know that just from the federal filing that it's a process, right? Rocco files, and I mean, we all know lawsuits take a long time, but can you just explain to everybody, what is the timeline like here, you know, in terms of waiting for the funding? Once you get the certain amount of funding and there's able to be a filing made, can you give a timeline to people and what we're looking at?
Well, I've been told, you know, ultimately it will take years. But if we can, for instance, put in a mask injunction and get that turned around, you know, that's a very positive step to helping. There'll be more exposure to what it is that the government is doing once we file. More people, you know, some people have said, like, even if you lose in a case like this, it's done tremendous good, because a conversation that wasn't being had is now at the forefront of conversation. People are becoming aware that their civil liberties are in jeopardy. And so that's really part of what this is about, as well as just getting people educated. And so once the file is done, I don't even know all the details. This is all so new to me. And so I'm also learning as I go, but I do know that the whole process could take years. If we're successful in getting the mask injunction, not if, but when, and revoking the Bill 19, like I say, they have got to provide us information to show that these measures were justifiable. And what I'm starting to feel when I've seen some of the news reports come in, you might have seen a week and a half ago that the WHO all of a sudden is saying that lockdowns are no good. Don't use the lockdowns. You know, we don't support those. It's like, you son of a guns. That's all you have been doing over these last months is like quarantine people, take away their rights. You might be removed from your home. Remember Tedros saying that? You know, coming in and removing family members. Like, again, how dare you? We're coming for you. So what do you know? There's investigations that are being commenced against the WHO and the actions that they've taken. Legal actions are beginning. Robert F. Kennedy, you know, is involved with this. This German lawyer Reiner, you know, is talking about this. And all of a sudden, the WHO is making this announcement. And then, interestingly, the health officer of Manitoba the same week, it's reported, I've got the news article saying that he as well is saying that lockdowns are not the way to go. So what I'm trying to encourage everybody in is that it may take time for this legal action to commence, but what it's doing is it's sending all of the premiers and elected officials, we've got your number, you were involved with this, and signing a piece of paper exonerating yourself does not work in Canada, because we have a rule of law and we are going to work to have that upheld. So you're on notice. And, you know, for the diehards, like Doug Ford right now digging his heels in, and John Horgan, I mean, I'm sorry. I think they look like the biggest fools in Canada at this point, along with Justin Trudeau, to think that they could put their fingers in their ears and say, la, 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 I don't hear you, right, is absurd. And we've got to do this. So please, like I say, please share the information. And we can't do this on our own. This is a team effort here.
Yeah, and I will continue to encourage everybody to please, you know, I say even if you're in other provinces, setting a precedent in BC, that, you know, that helps everybody. So please donate to Action for Canada, spread the word. Your mission is to educate, equip, and encourage. And I think we've really educated people and we're equipping them. We're telling them what to do. What encouragement can you give people right now? Especially, you know, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately. Canada's kind of a headliner right now because it's very obvious to the rest of the world. Trudeau's connections to China, all his corruption. And then now there's, you know, these quarantine camps being built across the country, which it sounds crazy, but it's true. Randy Hillier's been trying to draw attention to it. A lot of people who are in the know, who are doing their research, are feeling scared, hesitant, sad, fearful. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I can absolutely encourage people in the midst of this. Like, I have great hope, regardless, of my faith, because as a Christian, I also believe that God allows bad leaders. And the reason I say there's a lot of good that has come out of this is because you got to remember, I've been at this for 5 years. There's been people at it a lot longer than me who saw this agenda coming. We ignored the Global Compact on Migration and 17 Sustainable Development Goals that have destroyed our borders, and are allowing illegal immigrants in here. And these are people who will never assimilate and integrate into our Western culture. All right, let's make that very clear right now. We see it happening throughout France, Germany, throughout Europe, and they are in real big trouble. So that was the Global Compact on Migration. Immigrants are coming here illegally. They're getting more funding than our veterans and our elderly and the rest of it. They're being put up in $1 million homes. And a lot of those homes are just being run right into the ground in nice neighborhoods. The crime is going up. It's a problem. And anybody who wants to call me a racist over that, take back those words. You know what? We have a right to defend our borders from infiltrators who do not intend to do this country good. And if you heard, I don't know what the story is on Quebec and the knife stabbings and stuff that happened there last night, but hopefully we'll get to the bottom of that. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the 2021-2030 agenda from the UN, means that all of our resources will be taken away, right? Which is what they're doing. They're ruining our oil and gas industry, which was, you talk to the people in Alberta, the suicide rate was up. These people are working 3 jobs to make ends meet. They knew harm before COVID-19 came in. Now all Canadians, most all Canadians, are feeling the harm of having a government that is so corrupt, and that is, I call this the greatest heist in the history of the world. Because Justin Trudeau has been pouring our money into the UN and so-called third world countries in order to help. But have you seen any of the conditions in those third world countries getting better? And the answer is no. So our money isn't going there. It's going to the foreign central banksters. It's going to the UN and the globalists, and they're just waiting to sit back and get this vaccine going. That's going to make them $3 trillion in the first year. Why would 99.9% of the population who get through COVID just fine, whatever COVID, and why do they need a vaccine? Because these shameful addicts, right, want to push their drugs on everybody else to make them rich. No, thank you. So yeah, we've been at this a long time. COVID is just sort of the epitome of it all, and I'm hoping through this that we don't just talk about the COVID virus. We talk about the UN's involvement, and then we can talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's no longer a conspiracy theory, my friends. This is real. They are going to take property rights. They're doing that by thinking they can take your guns and, take control of the education of our children. The UN Comprehensive Sexual Education Program, it is to sexualize children at the earliest age possible. Come on, parents. Get involved with what your children are learning in schools. Get them out of the public schools. They're a cesspool at this point. And start learning what the UN has been doing. Stephen Harper even signed on to these Sustainable Development Goals. He was not actually a great friend of Canadians because of this.
Yeah, I can usually tell within 5 minutes of talking to somebody whether they've been actually doing the proper research or not. If they've gone past that surface level, then you do understand how this all ties in together, right? And it is big. And I agree with you about the agenda. I mean, our kids, my boys I have twin 8-year-old boys, and we've been really happy with their school and everything. But when everything started happening, I've always toyed with the idea of homeschooling. But then when everything started kind of happening over the summer, I just had this feeling like, I'm not scared to send my kids back because of COVID, but what is to come? What kind of craziness are they going to be expected to do in the schools? Is there going to be masks? What kind of toxic chemicals are they going to be breathing in there? What kind of talking is going to be going on? I just didn't want that impacting them. So I decided to pull them out and homeschool. And it was honestly the best decision I ever made.
So it's a sacrifice for families, but it is so important.
Yeah.
And I mean, just take a look at the example of the the climate change propaganda. They intentionally are using our kids in the school for social justice causes, UN social justice globalist causes, and manipulating them and terrifying them to think that the world is going to end in 10 years. I mean, the climate is always changing. BC weather is the same as it's always been. In fact, it's been colder in the last couple of years, and that's why global warming had to take a backseat and they turned it into climate change, because none of the fear mongering that the propaganda that they send out is ever coming to fruition. And, so yeah, should we take care of our environment? Absolutely. But Justin Trudeau, freaking out about straws and, he's going to be the superhero that bans straws. And now we've got trillions of masks and gloves in our streets and in the waterways and in our dumps. And, I'm like, what a fraud. He's a fraud. And this is one of those practical moments, you guys, use your common sense. He's full of it. He's dishing out a bunch of lies. There's no climate change. We should always protect our environment, but how about we get the Chinese to stop packing all their goods and wrapped in all this plastic that can't be recycled, goes into our landfills, and how about we start making Canadian, buy Canadian? We can go to the corner and to a person, that's making these products in their little factory. Like, let's get back to Canadian made.
Yes, exactly. No, and it's funny because, a lot of the stuff you're saying, I think everybody is at a different point on their journey of understanding what's going on. I'm in a very different place than I was even a year ago in understanding about climate change. I mean, I used to, I was the campaign manager for our local Green Party candidate a year ago. And I have really started to dive deep and understood what's really going on here. And you can really start to see how this stuff has been planned and it's perfectly orchestrated. It doesn't happen overnight. These things need to be placed. We need to be made to think a certain way, and we need to fear this, and then we need to, it's all so carefully orchestrated. So I love that you brought all this stuff up, because for anybody who's not thinking about this, you need to be thinking about this. The stuff matters. And like Tanya said, just, I was talking to a friend the other day, and it's like that meme, I don't know if you've seen it, where the person's watching TV and the weather forecast is showing that it's going to be raining. So they're holding an umbrella, but it's actually sunny outside. It's like, that's what's happening right now. You're just glued to your TV and you're scared because they're telling you to be scared. If you turn your TV off and you go outside, if we didn't have everybody wearing masks, which I think is the reason everybody's in a mask, right? They need us to still visually see that there's something still to be scared of. Because if you took the masks away and you turned off your TV, there's nothing going on. I mean, it's a regular cold and flu season. It's no big deal. I remember seeing those videos of people dropping dead in China, like back in January. And even that, I just was like, that just seems bizarre to me. I don't know. Like, this just seems really orchestrated.
People who know about lung infection stuff, right? They were diagnosing this and critiquing it. And they said, when that's happening to you, you do not fall down like that, right? So I don't know what they did to those poor people. And I mean, even consider if somebody showed up at my house right now and started dragging me out the door while they were videotaping it, they would have a bloody freaking, frantic person on their hands screaming and kicking and wondering what was going on. So however they staged all of this for the media of hauling these people out of their homes and terrifying the world, that we all needed to be quarantined. This was not a natural event. I completely believe that was staged. We know even about New York, they were showing what was it, a room filled with coffins, and then it ends up that photo was used like in 2001 and originally from Italy. It's like, this is in the report that I did with the government corruption and colluding with a foreign enemy, right? Like, these type of things were brought up. And when we talk about a minute ago we were talking about the Green Party, right? When I was talking in Vancouver, and it was just before the vote, I said the NDP, the Liberals, and the Greens are all part of the same socialist party. They're all wearing different colored hats. And unfortunately, pretty soon, we have to include the Conservatives in there because they have been infiltrated. And that is a Liberal party at this point. The others have gone completely not so extreme. And the Liberals, or the Conservative Party is actual straight Liberal. So whether we have to coordinate by the next election, Maxime Bernier is a great guy. I've met him. I think that he really sacrificed a lot by leading the Conservative Party and developing, the PPC on his own, the People's Party. And, I genuinely admire him because he voted some things in, like BLC 16, for instance, and at a second rally without any prompting, 2 years ago, he said, I need to make an apology for something. He said, I voted in favor of Bill C-16. And he says, I'm going to revoke that. That's one of the first things I'm going to revoke as soon as I get back into office. He said, because he had thought he was doing a good thing. And of course, Michelle Rempel and him in the one picture, you see them, celebrating together and all of this. And the thing is that she's a very influential person in the Conservative Party. And so she was appealing and victimizing the transgenders. She had spent one time in the legislature sort of like crying and tears coming to her eyes. And it's like, what about the rights of women, right? If somebody chooses, if an adult chooses that they want to transgenderize, that's their business. Let them do that. Don't victimize them and make the whole country, pay for that. And certainly don't bring this propaganda into our schools, because right now we have a mass social contagion going on in our schools because of the sexual education program I was telling you that comes from the UN. It was called the WIN program in Ontario, and it's called SOGI 123 here. And now we've got a 4,000% increase in girls who are questioning their gender. And I work with the father, Rob Hoogland, whose 14-year-old daughter, it was removed from his care by implementing the BC Infants Act. And the doctor who was involved in this is a trans activist and signed a form saying that she was of sound mind. Meanwhile, she was depressed, she was cutting, she was having some really severe problems, but that gave them the power to take control of her. And therefore, they went ahead, they're giving her testosterone. She's growing a beard, she's being sterilized in front of him. He'll never have grandchildren. I'd be enraged. I'd probably be in jail right now if that was my daughter, my kid, because I would have taken them and her and moved to another country. Who knows what I would have done. I'd abduct my own kid. And it's crazy to think that we would even talk that way. But that's what the NDP government is doing, and the Liberal government and the Green Party in BC. This is what they're supporting.
Yeah. And I mean, gosh, we could talk for another hour about this because I've looked so much into this as well. So G123, it's people just, again, you really do have to spend the time and educate yourself and understand what's happening right around you. I remember when, my kids were in kindergarten and they were going to have a day of this, sex education that's appropriate for kindergartners. And I just remember thinking, what's this all about? Right? Like, I didn't grow up with this. Like, why do they need sex education in kindergarten? And, so I went to the parent night where they were going to talk about what they were going to discuss with the children. And most of it was okay. It was things that we already talk about with our kids, like just your body part names and things like that. But there was just like one or two things in there that I didn't think that my children needed to hear about. And a lot of people around me were like, oh, Sunit, you're just being so, you're being too, whatever the word is, like too sensitive about it. And it's not a big deal. And I said, no, but this is exactly what people don't pay attention to. It's these one or two little things and you let it slide. And then next year, it's going to be a couple more.
Exactly.
We're talking about children who are 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 years old. They don't need to be, and I'm even seeing not on any programming they watch, but sometimes I watch some of the, I'm a volunteer with Operation Underground Railroad and with human trafficking, and I see the grooming that goes on. A lot of these people are sharing some of these cartoons and things. It's like, why do young children need to be sexualized at all? Why do we even need to go there?
Right, and this is where the UN and Hollywood are all working together. I call the UN pedophile central. I mean, we know that they're the UN. Not helmets. What's the name of the UN? Not military. there's a certain name for them. Anyways, they go into countries and, you know, they help people. Well, there's been 60,000 reports of sexual abuse of women and children by this group. And, you know, when you take a look at Hollywood, Disney, Walt Disney would be rolling over in his grave to see all the transgender garbage that's coming into the Disney programs and other programs for kids. I wouldn't even let my kids watch any of the cartoons or propaganda that's going on right now, because you just never know when they're going to be exposed to it. And you are 100% right. They are grooming our kids. They're trying to confuse them so they won't know normal, appropriate touching from not, normal sexual behavior from not. It's going to confuse them. Part of it, of course, is part of population control, because if you get enough kids that aren't interested in the opposite sex and focused on the most traditional and beautiful part of society, and that makes for the richest and most prosperous societies, is strong families. And when you're breaking up those strong families and trying to create a new form of family, I mean, I'm sorry, you need male and female no matter what to create a baby. And
well, you can see the, you know, I always say to people, just pay attention to what's going on around you. Bill Gates has openly talked about his desire to depopulate. Now we've seen these advertisements in Vancouver about the one-child family. I don't know if, I mean, come on. If you can't see what's happening here, now they're telling you how many children to have. It just goes so deep down the rabbit hole. Somebody's saying it's called UNESCO, the military of the UN, UNESCO. That's what somebody's saying.
Thank you. Yeah. So
yeah,
what I said at the beginning was, you know, if we take a look at this attack against the family, and it is proven like that when families are strong and, you know, the father is working and the mother, you know, is in the home raising her kids, I mean, this makes for a healthier society, and it actually makes for a more prosperous society, a stronger society. It's been proven. It's, you know, it's documented. And that's not to say that, you know, women shouldn't be working, but when the women's rights movement came in, the whole purpose was, I forget the woman's name, and she actually was part of the Communist Party. And if they could demean women to think that women in the home, you know, weren't as valuable as women in the workplace, which is something I know I struggled with when I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, because I knew how valuable that was. And I was proud to do that. And yet, you know, sort of being demeaned, you know, if I wasn't working. Well, the point is then you've got all these women working, and it increases the cost of living, because now you need two parents working, and then our kids are in the care of the government. And that's the 45 goals of communism, right? One of the big steps is to get the state in control of your kids. And one of the most, like I said, honorable roles a woman can have is to be a wife and a mother. And I don't care if I sound like a fool saying that or not, but it's what works. And then not only the value of taking care of your own family, but then you're taking care of your neighbor. You're able to help in your communities. You're able to, you know, help in areas that working women can't. And so I just want you to, you know, you stay-at-home moms, to know that your role is very valuable. And I totally respect, you know, the women who are working and juggling both. It's a very difficult thing to do. So
yeah,
everybody
absolutely.
what works for them.
Yeah. And one thing before we sign off, I just want to jump back to remind people, you know, we were talking about China a little while ago, and I just want to, you know, we're talking about people who are dropping dead on the street and everything. And I always say to people, do you ever wonder what China's doing now? It's funny. China's gotten through this and they are back at it, and they're doing just fine, and they're having parties, and they got through it all without a vaccine. Like, nobody's really asking what happened there. You know, how did they get through this? And we're still where we are.
Yeah, I haven't even heard any more what's going on.
Yeah,
you know,
people just need to really open their eyes and, you know, take a look at what's going on. So send us off with some encouragement. What do you see? I mean, you're in the know. You're dealing with, you know, the lawyer, and you're talking to people. What do you see coming up over the next 6 to 12 months for us?
Well, you know, the most exciting thing, you know, that I've been at this for 5 years. And when we were talking on the topics, we couldn't get a dozen people to come out at a meeting, never mind a rally. And what I'm seeing now is this explosion of Canadians, these patriots who are coming out at the rallies. They're writing the letters. I mean, I can hear about something and already hear that people are writing letters, and they're standing outside, you know, that elected official's office, or they're calling them, writing them, they're getting others involved. It is an explosion of Canadians. Canadians that are rising up, and we're seeing it around the world. You know, you see the rallies in Dublin and Europe, everywhere. We see what's going on in Toronto and Quebec and what's going on right here in Vancouver. I mean, we are having some tremendous rallies. So one, I really want to encourage you, get out there and rally. I don't care if you have to bring your umbrella, get your kids out there and be part of this, because your presence on the streets matters. It is sending the government a really clear message that we are not going to just roll over and take this. When I see 1 million people on the streets in Europe, and I just look at them and think, wow, you know, this is so awesome. And, you know, they're going to have civil unrest there at some point if the government doesn't turn this around. When I see Macron taking a sharp turn right now, and he is going in and raiding mosques, he's deporting, you know, imams and these radical Islamists. That's the last person in the world I thought who would have taken up the sword to do this. And so well done. But the presence on the streets in France is huge. And, you know, an election is coming up next year. And I'm shocked to find out that the NDP won. I'd really like to know if there was ballot stuffing or what went on there. I just literally can't believe it after all the damage they've done.
I couldn't believe it either.
But yeah, I just want to encourage people, you know, start reaching out, share this information, even if you think you're going to be unpopular or disowned. I've been doing this for a long time, and all that's going up is my email list is going up. So be courageous, take off your mask, go into every store, shop. If you have to get your phone out and record an incident, do it. And then go and file that human rights complaint. Empower yourselves, hear what we're saying. Thank you so much, Sunit, for having me on and having these conversations. I'm just thrilled to meet you and just feel honored to be here today and be able to have this conversation. So, you know, yeah, get out there. I see that the numbers are rising, and that's what's going to bring about the change. And as well, donate. Help us out.
Yes, guys, get out there, exercise your rights, know your rights, exercise them, donate, spread the word. Thank you so much, Tanya, for being on today. And you guys, please share. Okay, that's why I decided to take this, the podcast to YouTube, is because I know not everybody's always listening in audio. Some people like to be on YouTube. So now you've got it as a way to share. So please do. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. Share the hell out of this show. And for the comments, I appreciate all the comments and all the questions, guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you guys next time.